My name is Leanna Ursua, and I'm the membership manager at the museum and the Sea Center. And I'm so thrilled to be able to present the first installation of our three-part series called Cocktails with a Curator. Tonight's presentation is called The Life Aquarist, and it's featuring our live collection and husbandry manager, Tommy Wilson, who is at the Sea Center and has been working at the Sea Center now for 10 years. He tells me that his favorite cocktail is the classic old fashioned. Is that what you're drinking tonight, Tommy?
No, no drinks for me tonight.
Okay, maybe afterwards.
Yeah.
So, our presentation will go for 30 to 35 minutes, at which point we will then turn the floor over to questions. We will have about 15 minutes for questions. And instead of raising your hand to ask your question, we just ask that you type your question into the chat bar, which is located at the bottom of the screen, and then I will present those questions to Tommy at the end in the order that they come in. Okay, well, I think I can go ahead and turn the floor over to Tommy.
Hello, everyone. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us for the Life Aquarist. Once again, my name is Tommy Wilson. I am the Live Collections and Husbandry Manager for the Sea Center. So as you undoubtedly know, the Sea Center is our local aquarium down on the wharf, where we house local marine life that can be found right here in the Santa Barbara Channel. In our exhibits, we actually have close to 1,000 individual animals. So if I were to go through and count every sea star and brittle star and small anemone that we have close to 1,000 animals. And then comprising those 1,000 animals, we have approximately 75 species, including 2 endangered species, and those are the White Abalone and giant black sea bass. So the husbandry or aquarist team that we have consists of just 2 paid staff and then our core group of volunteers. That would be myself and Nora Frank, our Sea Center aquarist. As Leanna mentioned, I've been working for the Sea Center now for close to 10 years, and I've held many different job titles through that 10 years. But I actually started as a volunteer in the aquarist team, if you will. So I've said the word aquarist now many times, and some of you may know what that means. Some of you may wonder what in the world is an aquarist. That sounds like a made-up word. And still some of you may think that it has something to do with the zodiac Aquarius. Loosely related in that they both involve water, but we're definitely not Aquarius. We are people that maintain aquariums. So really anybody who takes care of an aquarium, be it a small beta fish tank all the way up to, say, Georgia Aquarium's 3 million gallon exhibit that they have on site, is considered an aquarium or an aquarist. So how do you become a professional aquarist? There are several ways, and it kind of depends on the facility that you go to work at. But at the Sea Center, it helps to obviously have an interest in marine biology. A dive certification is also very good to have. A degree in environmental sciences, and then of course a joy with working with the public. It's also recommended to have some experience with your home aquarium, as well as some plumbing skills. And then I think the best way to really become involved and get professional aquarist training is to volunteer at your local aquarium. That's actually, as I mentioned, how I started, and that's how I think it's how many other aquarists get their initial training. So the responsibilities of an aquarist can, again, vary from facility to facility. Here at the Sea Center, we are responsible for animal husbandry, exhibit maintenance, scientific collecting, maintaining the life support systems, and managing our small group of volunteers. Now, at some larger facilities, those aquarists, or sometimes they call them biologists, may only be concerning themselves with the animal husbandry and the exhibit maintenance side of things, and they have two separate teams for scientific collecting and maintaining the life support systems. Because we're a little bit smaller staffed here at the Sea Center, we get to take care of all that stuff all together. So to go into a little bit more detail on some of these things, the animal husbandry side is simply caring for the animals. We need to make sure that those animals are well fed, that they're healthy, and for lack of a better word, happy in all of our exhibits. Our diet plan is constantly shifting depending on what the needs are of the individual animals. When we go through and feed, we try to make sure and observe every animal eating at least some food, and if they don't, maybe the next time we go through and we feed, we try to target that individual specifically when we feed. We do some minor, very minor veterinary type care in treating our sick animals when they get sick, that is. You know, we have to be able to recognize when an animal may be sick or injured, and that can be kind of a heavy task for aquarium animals. We typically look for changes in behavior, maybe more erratic behavior. Obviously, if there's an animal that's swimming upside down, that's a pretty good giveaway that there's something wrong. And then being able to diagnose what's wrong with that animal, and then coming up with a treatment plan is also something that we take care of. Exhibit maintenance is probably 60–65% of the job here at the Sea Center. We're constantly cleaning all of our tanks every day. Sometimes that means draining specific exhibits and having to hop in, like what we're seeing here in the presentation. Other times it's a little bit easier, less invasive on the animals, where we can just go in with an algae scrubber and clean off the acrylic walls. And on the subject of algae scrubbing, that is predominantly the cleaning task that we're taking care of. We have pretty, I don't want to say intense lighting throughout our exhibits at the Sea Center, but for lack of a better word, very bright lights that like to stimulate the growth of algae on everything. And on some of the fake rock work, we actually like to see that algae growing. It means that our habitats are healthy and they're providing the right environment for our animals. But when it starts growing on the inside of the acrylic walls, that's where it starts becoming a problem, mainly for when our guests come through and want to look at all of our really cool animals. An interesting part about the exhibit maintenance is that if we're doing our job right, we typically don't hear about it. It's kind of a thankless part of the job, but you know, we're not really in it for the glory. And you know, if we're doing it right, you guys as our guests come through and you're not saying, hey, that looks really clean. You're actually saying, wow, look at the beautiful animals in this exhibit. And that's really our goal there with cleaning. Some not so common cleaning tasks would be things like wiping down and cleaning the whale statues or models in the lobby. This doesn't happen very regularly, but it does happen. And occasionally after hours, you may see some single person lifts raised up really high, and we're wiping those things down and cleaning and polishing the whales. And usually when that happens, I like to share on my social media with the hashtag Bathe the Whales. It's kind of an inside joke here at the Sea Center. Scientific collecting. This is arguably the most fun part of the job, I think, because we actually get to get into the water and bring in wild animals to our live collections. This part of our job is regulated by the state and the Department of Fish and Wildlife. We apply for a special scientific collection permit. And the way it works is we put a list of species down that we hope to collect with a number of individuals that we'd like to collect every year for the duration of the permit. There are some other, I guess, bureaucracy items that we have to take care of there. So we're always having to log our collections, making sure that each species that we collect is accounted for, the number of animals that we collect is accounted for, the location they were collected at, the method in which they were collected. So lots of data logging, if you will. For the actual process of collecting, there's several different methods. When I bring this part up, people think, oh, cool, you just go out and go fishing for your animals. Typically, we steer away from spearfishing for the obvious reasons, as well as rod and reel fishing, at least with barbed hooks. Those two methods are pretty invasive on the animals, especially spearfishing. Usually the animal dies if you shoot a spear through it. Instead, we use other tactics. So we will go down either on snorkel or full scuba and collect animals by hand, or we'll take hand nets down and try and net things, put them in a game bag, and then come up with our bounty, if you will. And then another really fun method is doing a beach seine, and that's the picture you see on the bottom right there. A beach seine is a large net that is weighted on one side, so you wade out into the shallows, stretch that net out, and slowly come back in from the surf, and you're able to collect a lot of different animals. In my experience, we've been able to collect thornback rays, guitarfish, round stingrays, numerous species of flatfish, surf perch, pipefish. We even collected a 24-inch leopard shark at one time. That was really cool. For the life support systems at the Sea Center, there are a lot of components that we have to maintain. These components are usually pressure systems, high pressure systems, so we have to be very careful when opening things up so as to not have water spray everywhere all over us and things shoot out at us. But all of these components that you see are necessary components to maintaining an aquarium. This is a condensed version of what we kind of have at the Sea Center. There's a few components here that we don't typically use, as we're able to draw water in from the end of the pier. But for the most part, this is a lot of the systems that we utilize to make sure that our water quality stays at healthy levels. There's different compounds that can accumulate in the water, and if they get too high, they become toxic for your animals. So these components are meant to remove those toxic compounds before they get to a dangerous level. So I mentioned the end of the wharf is where we get our water. If you look on the right here, we have this picture of the wharf, and at the very end here is our pump house, or the pump closet, which is shown out here. So that's where we're drawing our water. All the water that comes into the Sea Center is drawn from that location. We have pipes that go down about 25 feet or so, pumps up into this closet, and then back down, and there's two pipes that run along the bottom of the ocean to the Sea Center, which is all the way back here. And we usually only run one line at a time, but we have the other as a redundancy, just in case. And when the water gets to the Sea Center, we have a storage platform that's down below that collects all that water, and then it's pumped up through these big sand filters on the left here. And some of you may recognize these. These are the same kind of sand filters that you would find on a home pool or spa. It's not meant for aquarium use or saltwater use, but it gets the job done. Our maintenance schedule is a little bit more expedited for cleaning these filters out. We're handling a much larger bio load than you would find on a pool or a spa. We're typically cleaning those out about once a week as preventative maintenance, just so that things don't back up over time. Once the water is filtered through those filters, it goes into this room here that's seldom seen actually by our visitors. I think only staff and a handful of volunteers have ever really seen this area. This is our third floor head tank floor. So not pictured are head tanks. Those are 500-gallon reservoirs where the filtered water is pumped into. And from there, the water is chilled and then gravity fed to all of the exhibits below. From the exhibits, they actually feed into a recirculation line that goes back into that storage tank platform. So it forms one big loop, and we're able to actually recirculate a lot of our water. So in case of storms or really turbid, dirty water, we can shut down the pump house and just run on our water and recirculate that water. One of the dirtiest things that we are responsible for is what's called pigging the lines. On the right, we see a handful of what are known as pigs. Those are very complex pieces or pigs that we don't typically use at the Sea Center. We use some hard foam cylinders that we are able to push into our 2-inch intake lines. So what we're seeing now on the left is the result of that pigging. So the pig is sent through the line and it breaks up all the fouling organisms that get caught in our lines. It looks a lot like oil, but rest assured it is not oil. It's a very dirty, smelly job. It kind of smells like rotten eggs when we're doing it. But it's things that were already in the ocean that we're kind of putting back, albeit they are dead when we put them back. We also have our core group of volunteers. So we train our volunteers to help maintain all of our systems. We typically charge our volunteers with maintaining our exhibits, performing maintenance on those exhibits in the form of gravel washing, algae scrubbing, water changes. We also train them for the food prep and feeding of all of our animals at the Sea Center. And they do, if they request it, they do get some life support system maintenance. But again, because those are high pressure systems, we kind of limit their exposure to those systems just for safety's sake. And I'd like to give a big shout out to our White Abalone captive breeding program. I've discussed this topic numerous times to members and our guests and members of the public, but this is arguably one of our coolest programs that we get to take part in. And the Sea Center has been a part of this since 2006. The program itself has been in existence since the year 2000. Currently, the Sea Center houses approximately 40 living white abalone, which is a small drop in the bucket of the number of individual abalone that are within the program as a whole. So this program actually spans about a dozen different organizations and facilities. It includes state and federal agencies, research institutes, public aquariums, and a couple of private organizations as well. Recently, within the last 6 months or so, the outplanting of white abalone has actually started to begin. if you asked me a few years ago whether I thought that was going to happen today or by this time, I probably would have said no, but the program has grown by leaps and bounds over the last several years, and we've gotten to the point very quickly in which we're able to outplant these animals to bolster the wild populations. Currently, they're doing small batches. They are looking at how the animals are taking to the outplanting sites, whether or not those sites are suitable for the raising of white abalone. And finally, I'd like to just show some perks of the job. So when we're under the wharf, we get to sometimes take a camera down with us, get to see a lot of the wildlife that grows under the wharf. This is a school of, I believe, sargo, similar looking to pile perch that are common underneath the wharf. We oftentimes see octopus, lots of octopus under the wharf. So we have one of our former Aquarist interpreters, Ethan Nash, went with me on a dive once, and we found this octopus that was out in the open. Very curious, but then kind of got over it pretty quickly and scurried away from us. And then some footage inside the Sea Center. Getting a little close to our swell shark, one of our swell sharks in our channel catch habitat. That is a tree rockfish, a California scorpionfish, another scorpionfish. And for whatever reason, the tree rockfish was really wanting to steal the spotlight and was interested in the camera on this particular footage gathering. And then in the background is our state marine fish, the California Garibaldi, or rather the Garibaldi. So that's what I have for you.
So I'm going to present to you, I think we have a few questions here. First question comes from Gary Robinson. Gary would like to know, what is the most unusual thing, animal, plant, or not living, that you have encountered while collecting for the Sea Center?
The most unusual thing. I think the most unusual animal I've seen while on a collecting trip under the wharf has been the crowned urchin. Crowned urchins are typically found at the southern Channel Islands, or I take that back. It would be the black urchin, the black sea urchin. So black sea urchins are typically found in the Gulf of California and in much warmer waters. During the warm water event of the last El Nino, it actually brought some of those the larvae of black sea urchins into our waters. And there was a small recruitment event of those urchins under the wharf. And I actually heard from some colleagues as far north as Monterey Bay that they were spotted as far north as Monterey Bay, which is pretty far for an animal that is typically found in the Gulf of California. Another really unusual animal that we've found at the Sea Center was actually brought up in our crab net on the wet deck, and that was a freshwater crayfish. It washed out of Mission Creek after a storm, and there was so much fresh water being deposited around the Sea Center that it dropped the salt content around the Sea Center, that it was able to survive in that water.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Tommy. Our next question comes from Deborah Bertling, and she would like to know more about pigging. She hasn't heard about this before.
Yeah, so the way pigging works, at least for the Sea Center, is we have those two lines that run in tandem from the pump house to the Sea Center. We're only using one line at a time, and we let the other one sit for about 1 to 2 months. And the reason for that is we're bringing in raw water through those lines, and in that water is all different kinds of plankton. So that plankton is usually barnacle larvae, mussel larvae, and eventually that larvae settles on the inside of the walls of those pipes, those lines, and they start to grow. So we let those lines sit for 30 days to go what's called anoxic. It essentially kills off those fouling organisms, and then after 30 days, we send the pig through that line to break up all of that fouling and clear out that line. If we were to just let it run, those organisms would build up in that line and it would restrict the flow through that line. And eventually you could form a high pressure system that could pop the line. It could potentially do damage to the pumps that we use, and just create some not so great situations for us.
Okay. Our next question comes from Betsy Mooney, who would like to know how long does it take to clean every day? She didn't tell me what she's referring to, but you might know.
So cleaning is, I think on average, it probably takes a few hours every day to get everything that we absolutely need to get to. It really depends on where we are on our cleaning schedule. I try to keep a very constant, stable schedule so that it's not a bunch of work all at once and then a little bit of work here and there. We try to get to everything throughout the week so that it's not a huge task for us. For some of our larger tanks, say like our channel catch tank, we try to do what we call magnet clean. We use magnets to clean the inside of the acrylic here regularly, and takes maybe 10 minutes a few times a week. And then for the really hard to reach places of this tank, when we have to get in, depending on how long it's been since the last cleaning that we had to get in, it could take 30 minutes to an hour.
Okay. And okay, our next question comes from Jonathan Tobias. He would like to know if you use diatomaceous earth as the sand filter.
Yes, we do. We use a special grade silica sand that's a uniform grain size. That way we're able to actually get an effective filtration down to 30 microns, which is really small. It gets a lot of the particulates and plankton and things out of the water. Some things inevitably squeeze by, but it's not really enough to cause any damage to anything. It just sometimes, if it's really cloudy and we need to bring water in, it makes things cloudy for a few hours, but over time, the water clears itself out.
All right. Okay, our next question comes from Kristen Ingalls, and she would like to know how often do you release animals and replace them? And are the white abalone hunted by divers? In the area, sorry. Divers in the area.
Gotcha. So we like to say that all of our animals are ambassadors to the Sea Center. We do our best to make sure that we can rotate those animals in and out of our live collections. Depending on the animal, of course. There's sometimes a need for specific animals. For instance, our sea stars. We really value the sea stars that we've been able to collect over the last few years. And really, we actually haven't been able to collect some sea stars for the last couple of years. So unfortunately, those animals in particular, we do our best to hold on to those. But animals like our octopus or our swell sharks, those animals spend a decent amount of time in the Sea Center, a decent amount of their lifetime in the Sea Center, depending on how old they are when we get them. The swell sharks, most of the swell sharks we get as eggs, individual eggs that hatch out in our exhibits. And we keep them for anywhere between 4 to 6 years. Really, it depends on when we start to see their behavior start to change. Once they start getting a little bit more aggressive with other sharks in their habitats, that's a good indicator that they're ready to mate and that we should release them. As for white abalone, because they have the endangered tag on them, it is very illegal to fish for them. They are, I would say they would be highly sought after if there were more of them in the wild and they were easier to get to. White abalone population numbers are in the lower thousands. I think the last estimate I heard was maybe 2,000 to 3,000 animals left in the wild, and their native range is Point Conception, California to about midway down the Baja Peninsula. And typically, these days anyway, I've heard reports that most white abalone are going to be found deeper than about 90 feet.
She also would like to know if some of the animals that you've encountered have a personality.
Definitely. Octopuses for sure. We usually get two-spot octopuses, California two-spot octopuses. And from what I've heard from colleagues all around, that species is the best to have on exhibit because they're the most charismatic, but it really depends on the individual. We've had two spots that will light up when they see you come into the room or see anybody come into the room, and they'll kind of follow people across their tank or their exhibit. And then we've had other two spots that want nothing to do with people, and they just hide under a rock the whole time until it's feeding time when we introduce food. There are some fish that have shown some of that behavior, but it may be an associated behavior between they see a shadow of a person coming by and they think they associate that shadow with feeding time, so they kind of perk up when they see people come by.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that, Tommy. And Gary Robinson has another question. He would like to know if the white abalone will ever become a farmed species.
That is a great question. I would say if success continues the way it has and we're able to really make an impact on the wild populations, then I don't see why not. I think actually that's going to be probably the only way that you'll ever be able to eat white abalone again. I don't think that they will ever get to a point in the wild in terms of population density. But again, it depends on how successful the captive breeding program is. So never say never, but I think in the more immediate future that farming is probably the way to go. Certainly for the California species of abalone, I know that the cultured abalone farm that's here in town, they are or they will soon be a partner holding facility for white abalone, but those abalone are not going to be for sale. It's only for the captive breeding program for outfitting purposes, to my knowledge.
Okay, next we have another question from Betsy Mooney, who would like to know what your personal favorite marine animal is.
Oh, good question. There's so many. I am really fond of mantis shrimp. They're such cool animals. Mantis shrimp are not actually shrimp, they're more closely related, and they look more closely to lobster. They can get about this big, maybe 12 inches or so long, depending on the species. And they have their forearm or their front appendages are adapted into either big clubs that they use to punch things or a bladed appendage that they use to skewer and slice things. And they do it at an incredible speed. For the clubbers, I know that they throw that club so fast that it is known to produce light and sound. It's actually called sonoluminescence, and it creates a cavitation bubble um, that collapses on itself so fast that it's able to produce that light and sound. Really cool animals. Something that we encounter more frequently at the Sea Center, I think, are, at least for favorite animals, going to be Spanish shawl nudibranchs. Super colorful, really cool animals. They eat one species of hydroid, and they're able to use the hydroid stingers. Hydroids are closely related to anemones and jellies. The nudibranch takes those stingers and uses them for its defense. So really cool, beautiful animals.
Great. So another question from Jonathan Tobis. How difficult is it to keep the moon jellies?
Um, it can be difficult to keep jellies in general. You need to have the right circumstances, the right tank shape, the right flow parameters. Moon jellies, in my experience, have been probably the most hardy species of jelly that I've ever taken care of. Um, we've been really successful with our moon jellies at the Sea Center, so much so that we actually are able to propagate our own moon jellies in-house. So we don't have to collect them from the wild. We actually just do that. We propagate them here on site at the Sea Center behind the scenes.
Okay. Nancy Martin would like to know, how are the sea stars doing? She says she knows they've developed wasting disease a few years ago, and she read that they were developing an immunity or a way around it.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I haven't kept up on the most recent research on the sea star wasting syndrome. Um, from what I understand, the individuals that are left in the wild are probably the ones that have either a natural immunity or a natural resistance to this pathogen. Um, and I've read some research myself about what it may take to repopulate sea stars in the wild, and it may come down to captive breeding in aquariums um, or research institutes. I know that any aquarium that had sea stars on a UV filter, that is a UV sterilizer, their collection was actually maintained through that heavy wasting event that occurred in, I think it happened in Santa Barbara in 2014.
Okay, some people are saying they've heard that there's going to be some new animals coming to the Sea Center, and they want to hear more about those new animals and any other things we might be able to look forward to when the Sea Center reopens.
Yeah, so right now, my team is working on uh, acquiring and setting up giant Pacific seahorses at the Sea Center. Um, we did them before on a very limited basis. They were kind of on loan from another facility, but we're hoping to try and make them more of a permanent fixture at the Sea Center. We're also looking to implement, for the first time ever, a coral reef habitat or exhibit. And we're not sure how that's going to go in terms of the coral reef because we've never done it before, but we're definitely doing our homework. We're meeting, or rather discussing, with partner institutes and colleagues to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to provide the best parameters and exhibit space for those animals. We're definitely excited to get these things in because we get to expand our knowledge on animal care and husbandry. And they're really cool animals to have.
Great. Okay, so we've reached the end of our questions. So I would like to just say thank you to Tommy, and thank you all of you for being here tonight. If you, take that back. We have one more question that just came in. Do you have any fish tanks at home, Tommy?
Great question. I get this one a lot. I do not have any aquariums at home. Um, Personally, it's kind of, it would feel like taking work home with me. Um, that and I like to think that the Sea Center is my own aquarium, even though it's really not. But I invest a lot in my job here, a lot of myself into it. I have a lot of fun doing it. It allows me to use my knowledge base every day. So it's a really great, fun job.
And we're so grateful that you're doing what you do, Tommy. So I want to thank you, and I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. Um, I hope you can join us next Thursday. We will be featuring Dr. Jonathan Hoffman, who will be doing a presentation on gems and minerals. So that will be again next Thursday, same time, same place. And if you do think of a question for Tommy, I'm going to go ahead and give you his email address. So if you have a pen or a piece of paper, you want to write his email down. It's twilson at sbnature, SB as in Santa Barbara, nature 2, that's the number 2.org. Thank you so much for participating with us tonight. I'm so happy to see all of you here, and I hope you have a wonderful evening and stay safe, everyone.